so ago. And just going to reiterate this morning. I don't know if everyone was on. So it was brought to our attention probably a month and a half, 2 months ago that I'll call them out. Douglas County had a special assessment for $8,210,000. And it was going to run over 20 years and it was 8.12% interest rate. And they were running it as an installment. And so what came to light was that, well, the first thing was that our calculation did not match the bank's calculation. And, you know, what about this? So Mike and I did some digging and we discovered that, yes, there is a difference, and there is a difference because of the precision we were using, meaning the number of decimals we were going out to when we were calculating the installment plan. Okay, so that's the problem. And so what we came to do about it, okay, so the first thing is, don't get nervous that your installments aren't running properly. They are running properly. They are getting your principal all paid. It's just that there's kind of a shift between what you take in for principal every year, which then affects the interest somewhat. So, and we have to remember, this is an $8 million special. So when we say that it shifted like $13 a year, well, if you had like, let's say a $50,000 special, it might shift like 50 cents a year. So it isn't like, oh my gosh, my installments are all wrong. This is an extreme case, but it's good because now we know that we need to do some work on our installments. So what shall we do? And what we've come to the conclusion to do is that if your start year is 2025.
Answer is, I don't know.
And of course, you have to be running an installment. Your declining balance is not affected by this. So if you have an installment that starts in 2025 and forward, we will use the new calculation method that goes with the new precision. If you have one already running, we are going to continue along the lines that we used before, because we just can't, like, if you have one running for 20 years and you're in your 10th year, we just can't start recalculating that. We can't do that. That would not work. So that is the plan. And we are working on the programming, and that will be out in our next tax release before the end of the year. I'll just ask any questions on that. You can throw them into the chat if you do. The next upcoming thing is we had talked about this at our last auditor treasurer meeting in person, but to our tax statement outsource file, we will be adding a field, the stub total due, which will reflect the advanced payment amount. On our valuation notices, we are going to make a small change to our outsource file so that the address, the taxpayer address, you want to help out, right, will match how the tax statement address is formatted. Forum Publishing brought this to our attention that they aren't quite the same. And so they requested that we make them the same so that when we have counties that send them out together, the tax statement and the valuation in one envelope, it's easier for them to match. And so we will make that change as well. And we have to get that done because our outsourcers start working on that like in January. So we need to get that done as well. The next thing is we have 2 new assessment codes to add. This actually should have been done for Prism 2, but it was not. But we will get this in place so that when tax statements go out for 2025, this will be in place and it can be used. So the next tax release will include these 2 codes, and this is what they are. We are adding a 421, which will be electric transmission lines less than 69 kilovolts. And then we have a 422, which is electric transmission lines 69 kilovolt and greater. So these 2 codes affect countywide and local tax rate. However, the 421, the one that is 69 kilovolts, I'm sorry, less than 69 kilovolts will only be taxed countywide. And of course, these 2 little snippets came from the DOR website. So this is their guidance here. And then the 422, which is the electric transmission lines, that's 69 kilovolts and greater, that goes by the regular unorganized township, or it's inside a city or organized township. If it's unorganized, it's countywide. If it's organized into a township or city, it would be locally. Use the local tax rate. That will be in the next tax release. We have the programming done and we're testing that. The next thing, and we talked about this at our meeting in September as well, about our new procedure for Prism 3. So our plan is to get, it would mainly be updating our Prism, that you would be able to submit Prism as soon as you have proved your tax totals and are satisfied with them. And you probably are at the place of working with your outsourcer or Sue to get your tax statements ready. At that point, we think that we should be submitting Prism 3. The reason being, and this has been an ongoing problem, I think it started out when Prism started, because the first year was just like crazy trying to get it through and all of that. And so it just kind of started out there and kept going that we don't submit Prism 3 until we're done with tax statements. That's our last step. We've updated the treasurers, we're collecting tax, and now we submit Prism 3 and, oh gee, there's something wrong here. There's a rate that's wrong. There's this that's wrong. There's tax increment that's wrong. Your excess is wrong, whatever the case may be. So, well, excess tax increment maybe isn't so bad. That maybe affects maybe 10, 20 parcels. But a rate that's wrong could be pretty bad. So our proposal, and you will still be able to submit Prism 3 after tax statements if you wish, but we are going to get it in place that as soon as you're done with your tax totals, working on your tax statement proofs, you can submit Prism 3. And if that's all good, then you send your tax statements and everybody can sleep well at night. Any questions on that? The only comment I'll make is that I don't know if they open Prism 3 until March 1st. So, I mean, the early birds that want to get statements out the end of February, I guess that'll be your call. You'll still be able to do it anytime after the update to treasurers or before, but you'll have to make that call for yourself. Okay. PTR is changing this year. Not so much on your end, but the department has decided, and this will be discussed in greater detail at our assessors meeting, but they have decided that they want the Social Security information submitted from our New Year files with our tax information. We don't know how that's all gonna go. We're all just kind of like, oh, really? Okay. But what that will mean in practical terms for us is that procedures are gonna change here. Because what they want is they want the Social Security name and number of the people that occupy or are homesteaded on January 2nd of like the new assessment year, like 2025 assessment year. They want those people on this submission. Okay, well, this year, I mean, we're going to have New Year files created. That's going to be one thing by the end of the year, but how's that going to work going forward? And so we are thinking at this point that your assessors, I mean, some of you already do this. We remove old year files and your assessor is asking to create new year files. Tax files now I'm talking about, not CAMA land cal, tax files. We're thinking that's going to be pretty widespread. Because if they don't, they're going to have to sit on all these homesteads and Social Security numbers and all of that until you do create new year files. And so, like I said, we'll be discussing this in greater detail next week, but that's kind of how it is looking. As far as what CPT will need to change, well, obviously, we're going to need to change our PTR submission, but over and above that, the one thing is, and this was put into our system like quite a few years ago, that if you create new year files, you get the question when you're in the maintenances. Now I'm talking about owner, valuation, and our parcel maintenance, that you would get the question if you want to update your new year. And we default to a no. And what we're thinking we should be changing is that we would default to a yes. I do wish to update the new year. Of course, you can still hop up and change that. We're just talking about the default. But that it would make it easier that people don't just hit enter and, oh, the new year doesn't get updated. Because most things that you are changing, you would want to update to your new year. Any questions on that? No? Okay. And the last thing, and I'm going to need some help with this. Janelle has agreed to help me. She came to us about a week ago or two, whatever, and asked, said, I have a new detailed taxing district and I don't have any slots available. Well, that is a problem in itself. But what it was a city HRA that now I think the department is asking to have it split out. It has been involved in the county rates, but now it needs to be split out. Something along those lines. I'm gonna have Janelle explain this.
Okay, so there's two different statutes that apply for being either an economic development authority or an HRA. And based off of my conversations with Bill Sparks, that an HR, I have to have this straight, an EDA is under, okay, so maybe I'll have to back up a little. The city of Granite Falls for us has a new finance person who then was going through things and learning and had come with the question of why their HRA, no, their EDA, what should I say, Glenn, that we needed?
I think you called it an HRA.
Yeah, the HRA is separate. Okay, so that they wanted to see that broken out as their as a special taxing district. And so the statute for an EDA under Minnesota 469.107, that's the one if you see resolutions come in from your cities or your actual EDAs is the 0.01813 limitation on how much they can levy. Then there's also 469.033, which is for the HRA and applies to not exceeding the 0.0185. And that's the one that by statute, they would be levying out separate and would not be part of it. But when my cities created them back in 2019 to use those levy options, we did not realize it should be a different process. And so I wanted to see if anyone else has had any dealings with the separation out of the HRA into its own taxing district. I have a problem with, I'm already using both county-wides and that having rural development authority and then also a county HRA. And from what Bill Sparks confirmed with me is that there can be an overlap with collecting levy dollars over the same, a city HRA and a county over those same parcels. So there's no exclusions that way. So I'm looking for some help on this. If anyone else has done a different workaround or if they are actually separating it out.
And the other thing we discovered is there's only that certain number of slots on our tax statement. So whether it will, I mean, will it actually show as a line item?
Right, that after 5, right? You only have 5 slots on a tax
And then
statement.
Then we start slushing together.
Yeah.
Anyone care to weigh in?
Janelle, this is Vicky from Douglas. So
Yeah.
are you saying you already have a county-wide HRA and a city HRA, but you need to split out that city HRA further? Am I understanding that correctly?
They have been certifying the HRA levy to me within their actual total city levy.
Okay.
I've been giving it its own rate code within the city, but they want it split down into a special taxing district on the tax statement, which
Yep, so
statute supports.
yep, and we have something same thing. We have a countywide HRA or
Okay.
county HRA levy, and then we have a Alexandria City HRA levy that we kind of have a spreadsheet that we manually calculate the county HRA rate adjustment so that the people in the city of Alexandria are only paying the city HRA rate versus the county HRA rate. So we have an Excel spreadsheet that we figure out what the city HRA levy rate should be compared to what the county HRA rate is calculating. In our county HRA, we subtract out the Alex City net tax capacity.
How did you come about that information that they would be excluded? Is that an agreement you have with the city or?
I don't know, it just always has been that way.
Okay.
But I could share our spreadsheet with, and then we use rate type 12 to do that adjustment. We just put in the rate adjustment amount. And then I'd have to look at in tax calc. I think we list the county rate and then subtract the city, whatever. I gotta look at it again, but we use rate type 12
And I would think
to
that
do
what
that.
you're talking about that you're doing for this is similar to what I have to do for regional library. So I have to take out my 3 largest cities values when I do our regional library rate. So I understand where that part's going, but you're then not showing it as something separate on your tax statement, or you are?
We are. It falls in the, I forget what
It would just
category.
be called the HRA,
Yeah,
because it's still
Using the
underneath,
same code.
yes,
Okay,
Yep.
yes.
okay,
The only thing
The-
we do is that is hard coded in Prism because it has a separate Prism code, I do believe.
okay.
I'll email that to you, Janelle. You can take a
Sounds
look at
good.
it, see if that's gonna help you.
Okay,
And
so,
Canby, Ohio County kind of has that set up too.
okay,
That same setup. They have their City of Wilmer HRA rate, and as well they have the county HRA rate.
okay. So I still kind of feel like we can take it offline of today's meeting. I have questions about having conflicting information then from Bill saying that they are simultaneous, that there aren't exclusions on that. So, that you aren't exempting like that they're only paying into one HRA. And so I think that's something maybe we have to bring to outside of our tax group here and to a larger statewide level to make sure we're all doing that the same.
So you're saying Bill Sparks thinks that people in the city HRA district should be paying both county and city?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's quite right either. So like maybe we should check in with like some larger counties and see what they're doing too. Larger
Yeah,
than, Douglas is big too, but
not that big.
that that maybe hit some of that stuff harder.
Yeah, yeah. That have
Yeah.
people that specialize in these areas and know the rules and laws. Yeah.
Yeah, we're outside of, now this is being recorded, but I think we all were in a meeting not that long ago where Bill said he doesn't like to have things in email to have to be quoted back and things like that. So that he's gonna support us on whatever we decide.
Well, I know if you email him, he'll probably likely call you back, or even if you
Correct.
just ask him to do so. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Nothing on the record that he has to
Right.
be held accountable to. And um, but
Well, he kind
yeah,
of said that
I
right
remember,
now.
I remember him saying almost the exact thing.
yeah. And so where was I going with this? So far I have left it with my city that they would need to go through the process of certifying that particular levy separately to me, not as a line item within their big city levy if they want it separated out on their tax statement. And they said, okay. And so I don't think it's going to happen for 2025. And that because they need to update their levy certification process and stuff. And so Bill said he'd back me up on that one because obviously I'd have to go through and get a new code assigned for that to run it through. It's a separate, when we do our levy report back to the Department of Revenue, I'd have to have a new item on there. So it's probably not happening for 25. So we have time. So you have time, Gwen.
Well, we'll need time if we, no, yeah, we just need to know how it's supposed to work. And I mean, yeah,
I think at this point, I'm gonna do a little more research and I'm not gonna request you try to change anything in the next few months, at least not for getting tax statements out for 25.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. Okay,
So
well,
we're gonna
we'll,
come back to it.
yes, yes. Okay, so that's where we'll leave that, and, I am finished with, my little spiel, so we will move on to Julie, who's going to talk to us about advance payments. Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about the advanced tax payment option today. Usually it happens this time of year, early January, people are really anxious to pay their taxes. The menu option is in the treasurer's menu. This is where you'll accept advance payments, you can print a list of the payments that you got. It's a comparison once you get your taxes ready, and then you'll be able to create a counter batch. So in option one, that's where you will enter the parcel number and field exit, and then you'll enter the date and the amount that you got. F23, I didn't fill it on there, but that will let you change the special assessment amount. So if they want to pay more, if they want to pay less, you can be able to change the special assessment amount on there. Option two is where you will print out the advance payments that you got. It'll list the payments, parcel number, taxpayer, payment amount. You can even do mobile homes, and it'll show the special assessment type code that you entered in on the screen before. Option three is the actual tax comparison listing. Compare what they paid to the actual taxes due. Again, it'll print the parcel number, the date received and the amount, special assessment payment, and if an override on that special assessment was entered. This will show if there's an amount due or if there is a refund needed. This is the best time to refund those amounts rather than wait till the next option.
Julie,
Yes.
back on your slide you just finished up with, that's an area for us where a lot of times we have people that prepay on multiple parcels, and we apply it based off of their truth and taxation amounts, what to set to each one. So we have instances where some will say to refund and some will say due. And that's at that point in that comparison where we'll go back in and adjust our file to take and adjust the amounts between the parcels for the same people.
Okay.
And then run the report again.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else does that kind of tweaking. No,
No.
everyone sits there so
Nobody wants
quiet.
to talk. And then option 6, the last option, is creating a counter batch. But this cannot be done until after you've done your total settlement. This will create a counter batch using the payment info from the advanced payment file. And then once you get that in your counter posting, you just run your edit listings and post as usual. And that's it. Oh, do we have them in the wrong order? No. No, it's this.
Well, in that last slide that she had where when it creates the file, could you do your edit in there? Or not? Have you tried to do that?
What do you mean, edit in the counter posting batch, Michelle?
Yeah, like where Janelle said she reallocates some for people. Could you do that there? Would that screw something up if you don't change the advanced payment file?
Yes, you can do it in your counter batch as well. It's kind of preference, I would say.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna be talking about the 2024 new delinquent year setup. This is a sequence that will be coming out in the next few weeks and it can be run before January. In order for the 2024 delinquent taxes to accumulate interest and penalties, this sequence must be run. And then, by doing this sequence, you'll be able to do all of the following. And this option, once you do this process, your inquiry will change as well. And, this will be a good thing if somebody calls in and says, what will my taxes be if, I pay in this part of January or this part of February, et cetera, et cetera. The system will be updated so you can give a more accurate figure to the customer. So, but again, once you do that process, you want to do all these listings as well to make sure that everything correlates correctly. And again, the sequence will be coming out soon. You will not be able to run the following until you have completed the separate auditor's year-end sequence. Delinquent notices, delinquent newspaper listings, the delinquent judgment listing, and your 2024 state general property tax report. So keep that in mind. You have to run the auditor's year-end sequence, okay? Which will be coming out as well. This is in system file. This is where you go to add your 2024 delinquent year. I know this probably all looks familiar to you guys, but right in this spot right here in the red box, that's where you're gonna add 2024. And then this is an example of the backer of the tax statement. This is where those percentages come from. That I'm sure everybody, it looks familiar to everybody. And then, for example, the data from those above tables is pulled from the DOR tax table. And our system does combine September 1st and September 3rd dates. It's up to you if you want to use them. Okay, and then I kind of go into further where these fields, what they mean and, you know, where those numbers correlate from. I'm not gonna read them all because we can all read those, but this is just examples, of course. And then beginning in 2024, last year, as a reminder, a county board by resolution may establish an interest rate lower than the interest rate determined by the Department of Revenue. After you fill in all that information, you want to press enter to get to the penalty tax parameters. Right here. And again, these are standard dates listed. Some of these dates will be different. And you can change them as needed per your county. Okay. Once you have all that information, you can press enter. And then you can go ahead and set your publishing costs to your county's due date. Costs will accrue on the following day. And keep in mind, these are examples only. Make sure you do what is pertinent to your county. Sometimes dates fall on weekends, so you want to adjust accordingly. And then we have the year-end sequence, which Susie will be handling. Oh, wait a minute, we have Janelle next again.
Yes.
Sorry about that. But yeah, that's the new year delinquent setup. So the sequence will be coming out soon and certain things need to be done before you can move forth. Anybody have questions?
So Janelle has agreed to share her year-end reports that she runs and her process that she follows in county. And we're just gonna get this so you can share your screen. No.
Okay, Janelle, I think
Okay.
you there now.
Yep, I have the green button. It was saying it would let me share.
Okay.
Before I start on the year-end reports, I'm thinking it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the late notices. I don't know if everyone out there runs like early December, or if you run them just after your second half November due date, the late tax notices. We usually do ours the beginning of December here. So after we've hopefully collected some of the people that paid late, we send another notice out for that. Yep, so Marshall sends theirs. So something with your late notices, I don't know if everyone also does their mobile home. Aurora from Lyon County and I have been talking about mobile home. I'm not sure how many counties actually have mobile home parcels. Ours are thankfully going down, that I have probably a dozen or less. And so from what we have been reading through the delinquent personal property manual, it's a reminder that you do not, statute allows you as the auditor treasurer to actually delete or abate mobile home taxes that are more than 5 years old if you've deemed them to be uncollectible. So it's kind of a wide open thing. I don't know if Aurora, you want to have any comments from what you were been working on the last couple of months, but if you find pages, so there's a notice of delinquent taxes. So when you get around to doing your delinquent notices after the year rollover, just by sending that notice is enough for satisfying your delinquent notifications for mobile home. They are different, being personal property taxes versus real estate. So you would not be sending those on to the courts necessarily for judgment, not in the same way that you do real estate. So keep that stuff in mind. So I will move over the list of year-end reports here. You guys may consider this overkill to some of you. Can you see this list?
Yep, we see it
Oh,
here.
we can.
All right, so I tried to kind of quantify what everything is that we've run, and none of these are paper reports for us these days. I just saved them into their corresponding folders that on our network. And that, so what I call a tax collection book is old terminology, you know, kind of maybe back when we did actually write a lot more stuff in books. It gives you a break of all the payments for the districts and the rates. It's like your settlement reports, but it's going to be for the entire year. And that's so you have each of those. So if you've saved them from your settlements, you then now have a complete report, not having to add them all together for anything you need that way. The tax receipts book, those reports that you run, I actually run them in both a batch history and in a journal format. My add, abate, forfeit reports, those I do based off of whether they were actually an add and abate situation that's separate from tax forfeiture. I can talk about that a little more too. I usually abate my tax forfeited taxes on the last day of the year all by themselves, that they usually land on 12/31. And any add and abates happen between January 1st and December 30th so that I can run reports to separate out what is forfeited and what isn't. Then I also run basically a pre-rollover unpaid settlement, which is in two forms because the Form 51s for schools, those are gonna be 2 segments because they do it in a weird part of the year. You know, they end June 30th. And you can use, I usually use the pre-made software form that CPT has for the Form 51, but I do like having the backup in case something doesn't look quite right to me, that I have possibly messed something up in the system. And that I'm on record now saying that I actually sometimes mess things up in the system, right?
We'll remember
and,
that. It's recorded.
Yep, it is. I admit I mess things up. Delinquent interest book, something with that I have found over the years, timing wise, is I consider it a live report. So if you have any payments that have applied or you've started letting people post in January and you don't have that run yet, it's going to reflect any current payments that have happened. So I don't, it's Gwen, is that how you guys consider the delinquent interest listing?
Yes. Mhm.
Live, right?
Yes,
And
live.
okay. And then I also run a bunch of reports for special assessments. I do one big report that has all of them from our system. And then I also break it down into ones per city because they have their own range of special assessment numbers that coincide with their city number. So all of those I run before I roll over the tax year. And so we have the delinquent interest book then has the snapshot of before you've rolled over the year. And then I run it actually a second time with a 1/1 date that has, so like in January, it will have 2024's current year rolled over to delinquent. So I'll have 2 of those in there. So does anybody else run this much? I'm not sure. I use bits and pieces from time to time. And I also provide the special assessment, the delinquent interest listing, and unpaid settlement, the actual after I roll over ones to all of my cities every year. And so I could be the person that is unwittingly or used to cut trees for all of this stuff.
Yeah, Janelle, you're not the only one. We run every and any possible report we can before we turn over to the new year. So you're not alone.
Okay. And that I do have 7 more pages after this that actually tells you how I run them. So that I can have those guys send it out to all of you that you can have my Word document and delete and add whatever you want to them if you want to incorporate anything. But yeah, so it's kind of weird. I can't always say that I use every report every year, but sometimes I don't know, I'm scared not to print it and then I'm gonna be bummed that I don't have it anymore. And so then our year-end reports, they just end up in these file folders each year. So like the add abate folder, I run it for real estate and mobile home. If you're fortunate not to have mobile home, yay, good for you. And otherwise, if you're not familiar, then it's the settlement here that it just looks like. And I do all of them. I haven't ever really used the township breakdown or the district ones, but I just run the entire thing just to have it. So, it's 376 pages long. And so let's see. So my city reports then that I send out, like I said, delinquent interest listing, unpaid settlement kind of things. And then the special assessment reports, I run them each of my cities. So Lincoln Pipestone, Rural Water, county ones, and then everything else is tied to their city. Gonna go. And that, so some of them are pretty short. St. Leo has one special assessment. And that, so, anyone have any tweaks for me or critiques to say I could cut out some of this?
Oh, big, so we only give the special assessments to the cities that want that. I mean, most of our townships and the smaller ones, they apparently aren't tracking that specifically or what. So we don't run them for everybody, only if they request the breakdown.
Sure. So I guess this is a little more of a take it and do what you want with it and or nothing.
Janelle, just as a procedure thing, you're running all these to PDF. I'm not sure if everybody knows how to do that. I'm guessing you're using the PDF option on most of in the job control on most of these, correct?
Yes. Yes, because I don't think any of them require me to use School Flex anymore, that they all
Okay.
have the option in them.
Because one other thing, and I don't know if you're using it or not, IBM added in the latest client release that they have a printer output option from the menu on the top, and you can take any school file and dump it to a PDF through that also.
And yes, they don't look like they work right, but they do. So here I can share again. That share. So we do have that, and that's under the printer output. Yeah. And so I'm gonna admit that I am a pack rat on the school folder, so you're gonna see this in a second. That's why it's taking so long to load. I need to clean house there.
You and me too.
We're almost to the current. There we go. And that's so yeah, that you can click on those and open them and save them as. So my ditch listing here, then I can do a save as and put it where I need it to be. So that's been pretty handy. I've actually had that for a couple of years already.
Yeah, I mean, that came out with the release, I think it was probably 2-3 years ago. But I just wanted to thank you for covering that. I just wanted to make sure people knew that there was a way to do that, if they're in the school file.
Yeah.
If anybody does have any questions on that, they could contact me and we could work with IT on making sure you have the most current version of the client, the IBM client. And Janelle showed how to do it, so it's pretty easy to go through and do it. But you do need the new client.
Yep. And all you have to do, I think your reports have to be set to hold.
Yes.
Otherwise they won't be in the spool.
So they don't print automatically. Yep.
Yep.
Then they'll stay in your spool file, and then you can do the PDF from the spool file to dump it right to a PDF file. Any questions on any of that, or comments or thoughts?
All right, Susie?
If not, then I will share here. And just briefly. Okay, you can see the year-end sequence here.
Yep.
All right, so the year-end sequence is kind of the shifting point. Everything that we've talked about up until now, you would do before running this year-end sequence. When it comes out closer to January, the first, oh, hold on, it's not moving. There we go. The first step of that year-end sequence is to run all your listings. We give a pretty short set of listings. This is where you would pull out Janelle's and supplement with whatever you want to from there, because very often when you change to the new year, you can't necessarily run all these listings in your old year anymore. The next three steps are what I sort of think of as the meat of that sequence. Once you've done all of your listings, then you're going to back up your tax files. You're going to update your payable year and remove your paid up receipt parcels. All of this is done in your data processing. And I'm not going to dig through it because it's really very straightforward. But you really don't want to go mucking around in your system file. There's a lot of things that can be messed up. For all three of these steps, well, maybe not update payable year, but that takes just a couple seconds. You want everyone off the system. So if you decide to do this like at the end of a day, please let us know and we'll make sure someone is available for you should something go goofy and you need to actually use that backup. That's, rare, but every once in a while there is something. So if you're planning to do that, give us a heads up and we will make sure there's someone for you to contact. So you're going to back up your tax files, go in and update your payable year. It's just the payable year. We don't touch the assessment year. The assessor will do that. Most of them probably have, maybe some of them haven't, but we're going to update our payable year this year to 2025. And then you'll go in and remove your paid up parcels. Once you've removed your paid up parcels, you cannot go back to 2024. But removing them, make sure that when you're looking at your delinquent parcels, you're getting the correct first year status and everything's going the way you want with those. The meat of this sequence is just those three quick steps. And then after that, we move on to dealing with our new 2024 delinquent taxes. This is what makes them join the delinquent taxes. We'll do your delinquent, you can do some delinquent listings, kind of like Janelle said, she'll do a listing before and a listing after and look at how the 2024s get added in. And then look at the delinquent letters and the delinquent judgment and newspaper listing, which Shannon is actually going to dig into for us.
Yeah, we'll have to just page down,
Yeah, I was just saying we'll have to go down.
Yeah.
'Cause it's-
there on the bottom.
the screen that.
You can hit enter, sorry. Just hit enter. Oh, no, sorry. Do the back. Toolbar, yeah, to go down.
While
to
you
the
guys are looking for stuff, I could add something about my delinquent letters that I send them out. I send them out in actually two groups. I send out there's the first year delinquent versus the ones that are have previous years. So I send out the court letter with the first year delinquents, and then I run all the other ones that have multiple year delinquent as its own grouping. And that's so when she's covering that part. So I run my notices in two different ways or with two different options. And we send the non-first year delinquents out before we get the court letter back.
Okay. So I'm gonna go over the delinquent interest listings and notices and also the judgment and newspaper listings. And those are located on the delinquency menu on the auditor side, and you'll take number 23, which will take you to the miscellaneous delinquent menu. And then you can see I've circled the items that we'll go over, and I'll start with the listing the delinquent interest, which is number 11. And I've gone over each of the options, so I'll kind of go through them quickly. A number of the options you actually won't be able to change because you set them up when you ran the New Year delinquent setup sequence that Liz had gone over earlier. So, number one, the enter the interest date, the figured from date where I have January 1st, that's preset, so you can't change that. But then on the second line for the figured to date, that is the date you want your interest to be calculated through. And number 2 is already preset. And then 2A would be the date that you are printing your listing. So for my example, I'm printing it on January 3rd, 2025. And then items 3 through 6, they are already set up in the New Year delinquent setup sequence. Question 7 is up to your county. Do you want to include the bankruptcy and the confession of judgments? And item 8, the print options, we recommend printing all townships, but you may have different circumstances where you need to use the other options as well. 8A, if you answer yes, it prints the listing in alphabetical order by taxpayer name, and it creates one large listing. And this can only be used for print option 1, which is all townships. When you have an N in it, then it prints by parcel order and is split up by townships. And 9, do you want to create a PDF output? Yes, no, or a pop-up? And 10, do you wish to print a PC file? And if you do that, that would be located in your tax bill folder. Then here's an example of a delinquent interest listing, and it's listed by township, and I just have a few examples on there. Next, I'll go over the delinquent notices. And for the first part, where you can enter your county name and address, etc., you would only use that if you are not using letterhead. But if you're going to use letterhead for your notices, just leave that blank. Then you can choose between options 1 through 4, which if you want to do your first year delinquent only, or however your county wants to use this. Then enter the interest date, it's the same as before, where the first date is preset and your figured to date is the date you want your interest to be calculated through. There's also an additional pay by date, and I'll show examples of this on a couple letters later, where you can choose if, for instance, my letters are, the amount is due through, or calculated to be due through January 1st, but then I also have a second line where if you paid it in February, this would be your amount due. Enter the payment cutoff date for publishing costs. That is also set in your New Year delinquent setup. And the actual notice date is the date that you want printed on the top of your letter. So for this letter, I had put, I wanted it printed on January 2nd. And then the rest is also preset in your New Year delinquent setup sequence. And then there's a second page of options for this as well. The first one, do you wish to have publishing cost information printed? Yes, no, or V for verbiage, which from what I understand, some counties may use, but maybe not. It's different wording. Then there's bankruptcy or confession, if you want to print that. Do you want to use the Department of Revenue notice format? Who do you want to print copies for? Delinquent taxpayer copy, current taxpayer, etc. The next one, print the notices in alpha order. Again, if you put yes, it prints in order of the taxpayer name. If you have a no, it prints all your notices in order of parcel number. And then report generator, if you put a Y there, it will take you to a report generator to print the letters. And the last item is to enter your desired print option. Do you want to run all townships or selective, etc.? And again, we recommend that you run all townships, but you may need to run a smaller group of letters. So here are examples. And I'll start with the delinquent tax notice listing at the bottom. So this actually prints all of it's a summary of all the letters that you are printing. And I recommend like printing that first and looking at it and kind of running through it and making sure everything looks correct. And then after that, printing the letters, otherwise you could have wasted a lot of paper if there's something that doesn't look right. The left example shows the first letter where it just has the amount due through January 31st. And then the letter on the right, you'll see at the bottom, it also includes that second amount due if you were to pay your taxes in the month of February. And then lastly, I'm just gonna quickly go over the judgment and newspaper listing, which is number 20. The examples for this example is for a judgment listing, but the newspaper listing has the same options as well. And most of the options are the same as the options in the delinquent interest and notice listings. The top screenshot, A, B, and C, there are choices that are determined by the county user. And then, again, on the bottom screenshot, the figured from date is set up in the new year delinquent setup sequence. And then the user determines when the interest is figured through. And then 2 through 6 is also set up already in the new year delinquent setup sequence. And 7, 8, and 9 are all things that you can determine how you want to use them based on your county's needs. And finally, this is a couple of examples of these. The one on the left is the judgment listing. And you'll see it's by township at the top, and then it lists, I listed 3 different judgments for this county, and the one on the right is the example of the newspaper listing example. And again, it's separated by township and it shows total due, your total tax and penalty due, and then it splits it up, the delinquent interest and penalty amounts. And that would be what you would send to your newspaper for them to print those listings. So that's all I have for that. I just want to also include that you can kind of play around when you run these listings. And if you want to try things one way and then see how it looks the other way, you can certainly do that. Does anybody have any questions? Or comments? Hey, Susie, you need to take over the screen.
Yeah, so you guys will have to stop sharing so I can start.
Yep.
And then, I'm going to share about ditches and specials, and that'll be it for today. This should be especially helpful to folks who are newer to ditches and specials. I know we have Faribault, who's a new county on here, and we've been getting some other questions from counties about the basics of our ditches and specials program. Hopefully this will give you a good sort of overview for that. So when we start with ditches and our ditch subsystem, and I will pull up my iSeries and navigate there for you in a bit, but there's kind of two parts to our ditch subsystem. One is the parameter file and the other is the benefits file. The parameter file is mostly dealt with in options 1 and 11. Option 1 is where you maintain it. In option 11, you can list what's in your parameter file. So parameter file is where you put the current year's assessments. So right now we would be putting in 2025 ditch assessments into that parameter file. The benefits file is options 2 and 12. And that is sort of ongoing, what can be for the current year or really any year. But all of your ditches that have parcels connected to it that benefit from that ditch can be listed in that file and continue to sit there and will only be used when you add that ditch to your parameter file and then work with it from there. So very often we see counties starting by maintaining their benefit file. You would open individual benefits and alter them as needed. If you have a split, you can go in and change the benefit on one and add a new benefit to another parcel. If you have like a redetermination or something where you are making a lot of changes, we do have an option to upload from Excel. So if that's something that's going on in your county, contact us. We have instructions that we make sure we keep up to date for that situation. Whichever way you do it, whether you're editing individual benefits or you're doing a large upload, then it's always a good idea to list and proof those, go through it, make sure it looks the way you want to. One of the things that we look at in dealing with this, like I said, is the split description listing, and I will navigate to that and just briefly show all the different ways you can look at splits and make sure that those benefits are being dealt with appropriately. The other half of it, like I said, is the parameter file, and the parameter file is where we apply assessments to our benefits. We can proof it by listing it and comparing it to your sheets, and then you can list your benefit amounts to see how those assessment amounts affect your benefit amounts. And we see counties using that parameter file through the year as sort of a what if for different types of different amounts of assessments. And I'll run through that quick too. Then the last step is to create our ditch special assessments. Once you feel like you're all correct, your information is all correct in your ditch subsystem, then you create ditch special assessments, which pushes whatever data you have in your parameter and benefits files into the special assessment subsystem. What that means is once you've pushed it through to the special assessment subsystem, if you go back into your ditch subsystem and change things, it's not going to affect those special assessments. In order to change those special assessments, you'd have to edit them in the special assessment subsystem or delete what you push through and retransfer. And we'll look at that shortly as well. But if I pull my iSeries, you can see my iSeries now. I'm in the auditor's office. And if we go look, I'm going to take option 23 to see our custom options. And in your custom options, here's an option 19. We can see our split description listing. And if we go in here, it gives you a range. So you could say, I want everything that's been changed this year. And then you can choose, do you want all of your split parcels? Or like in this case, we would take a 2 and look at just the split parcels that have ditch assessments. You can also look at the split parcels that have special assessments that are in your solid waste, that were attached to a power line, or that are in a tax increment. It's a great way to check and make sure all of those systems have been updated with any splits that happened in your county, and run that listing. Unless somebody else has something to add, I'm going to go into our ditch subsystem. So I'm going to take option 11 and then option 9 and go into our ditch subsystem. So in the ditch subsystem, like I say, people often start with the benefit file, but I'm going to start by looking at the parameter file. I set up my parameter file here with one assessment in it. My ditch 3120, I'm going to assess. Now you can have up to 4 digits in your ditch subsystem, but up to 5 in your special assessments. And that means that we can have 3120, and if I put a maintenance code of 5, my special assessment is going to be 31205. This assessment that I put in here, this levy, is going to be a 4-year levy. It starts in 2025 and it runs for 4 years. So if I was to have 3120 assessed again next year, I could put 3126 for 2026 next year and have that be a separate assessment because we're combining those two. That's why we do that. So in here, you're going to put your ditch code, your maintenance code. It's explained in the sequence. The maintenance code of 0 is its own special case. You can go look at that if you have questions. Start year of 2025. I'm going to say this runs for 4 years, has an interest rate of, well, this is 0.3%. It's really good, isn't it? And then you would either put in a percent of benefit or an amount to be raised. So right now I put in $20,000. Why is it giving me 39? We'll see when we go here. I put in $20,000 and we'll see what that does. So if I was to get out of here, I'm going to show you how those things show up when we list our parameter file and our benefits file. So if I go into parameter file and I do the listing, when I go into display print, well, everyone has this printer output option. I'll start here and then I'll go to printer output. But if I hit F11, that's going to show me the date and time so I can make sure I'm getting the one I want. This time it's really easy, but sometimes it's not. So this is just going to list everything that's in the parameter file. This is really helpful if you had like a lot of ditches for 2024 and you want to clear out this parameter file, but you still want a record of those, or maybe some of them are being assessed again, or you want to be able to reference. You can list everything that was in that parameter file and have a reference to be able to go back to as you're inputting ditches for the next year. Or if you want to know what ifs you ran or whatever, you can list the information that's in your parameter file. But if I take option 12 and I go into my benefits file, I want to show you just a few things you can do in here. For all of these, I'm going to list by ditch. And I'm going to start with a listing of all my ditches. So I'm going to do all ditches, and I don't want detailed information. I just want a list of all my ditches. So I'm not going to print names or addresses. I'm going to print totals and only totals. I don't need a PC file because I can go to my printer output and pull up. I have mine sorting by date. So my newest one is always on top, which is, I really like. And here you can see I have kind of a nice little listing of each ditch that's in my parameter file. It tells you what kind of records are in there and how many records are in there and some of the benefits. But it's nice to be able to look and reference, what ditches are in my benefits file. And then you can go back and print individual ditches as desired, which we'll do now. If I take option 12 and I go back into my benefits file, I'm going to do a selective ditch. And this time I'm going to do the ditch I have in my parameter file. So I'm going to say assessment amounts. Now, in order to print assessment amounts, I have to have the ditch in my parameter file, because otherwise you only have benefits. You don't have assessments. Assessments go into your parameter file. So I'm going to have totals, but not just totals. So I can see the details that were with that ditch in my parameter file. And this is going to be 3125. Because when I'm printing it with assessments, I need to add that maintenance code. I need to know what that maintenance code was for my parameter file. When I do that, I can pull up my ditch and I can see the benefit amounts and the assessment amounts that are going to be with the way it was in my parameter file. If I go down to the bottom, yeah, it's assessing a $20,000 ditch. So say your county wants to know, if we do a $20,000 ditch, how much is that going to be for each, for each assessment? Let's look at what these are for each benefit. You can run this listing. Now this is giving the total. The way I have this set up, this total would be spread over 4 years. You can't see that in here, but you can see the totals. If I was to go back into my parameter file and run a different what if, let's say instead of $20,000, I decide it's going to be $40,000. I could go back and run the same listing and it would change those amounts. If I do no, I want assessment amounts and totals, but not just totals. 31, 25. You can see my first amount before was 30 something. Now my first amount is 60 something. It's double that amount. It can be a really helpful way to sort of run some what ifs during the year. If you need to change, if you see that there's a benefit that's off, you can open it up in your benefits and you just need to know the ditch number. I'm going to pull up my favorite ditch number and parcel number. I own this parcel, my county, I own the parcel. Here you can change the descriptions, the acres, the benefit amount. If you need to change the record, the status, you can make this excluded, delete it, no special assessments, whatever you need to do from here. Once you feel good about the parameter file, what's in your parameter file, what's going to be sent through, then you can go and take option 7 and create those special assessments. So our first step is our benefits file, then we do our parameter file. Once we're good with everything and we've proved it, we'll take option 7 and create special assessments. So there's 3 options here. You can either print it and then proof it. That's a really great way to proof before you send through. You can create the special assessments. That's going to send them to the special assessments menu. Or you can do both. You can create them and print it. That's what I'll do this time. And then you can do all ditches. That would be all ditches that are in your parameter file. Or you can come back and you can run selective ditches. I'll start with all ditches here. And we do make sure that you're not creating them without not wanting to. We make you type create. And it should have sent them through to my special assessment menu. So I'm going to head over to special assessments. If somebody has something to add about ditches, something they think a new person would appreciate, hop in. Otherwise, I just send them to special assessments in option 6. In option 6, if I wanted to find them, I would take option 11 here to list my assessments. And I'm going to list them. Yep.
Kit had a question in the chat. I'm not sure if you see those.
Oh, no. Can we put an interest rate example on the parameter file? I don't see a spot. Oh, so if I go back into the ditch menu, in this interest rate, this is a 0.3% interest rate. If I was to put, if I wanted, which I think is what I actually thought at the time, was that this was going to be a 3% interest rate, 3,000. That would be the interest rate. This is the interest rate that pushes through to the special assessments menu. So when we see it in our special assessments, it's saying we're giving this a 3% interest rate.
So how do you know it's 3% or 0.3? There's nothing, there's no like example of what's what. It's a guessing game. Oftentimes I end up having to delete it and re-enter it because I have the interest rate wrong.
Right.
It only shows up like normally on your edit listing.
Right. So because right here, it's tough to tell whether it's 3% or 0.3 or 0.03. The only way to really know is right here in this number 3. That means that this column is assuming 3 decimal places. So just like over here, we're assuming 2 decimal places. That's a little bit more obvious to us because we're talking dollars and cents and we're assuming 2 decimal places for cents. Over here, we're assuming 3 decimal places. So the last 3 are going to be after the decimal. We just know because this says 3 that the decimal is going to be 3 in from the right. Is that helpful?
It makes sense, but I'll forget it by the next time I do it, but it makes sense.
Well,
That's true.
We should put that in our sequence somewhere and just an example of that somehow.
We'll make a note to add that to the ditch sequence. Ditch sequence, added decimal note.
and Susie, that's when it's 3, that's 3%. So they do not have to enter 0.03 as a
They
percent.
can't.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's maybe confusing because this is a 3 and this is a 3. If I was to do 5000, that's going to be 5%. And this is common across our system where if you see this 3, that means we're assuming 3 decimals. If you see a 2, we're assuming 2 decimals. If you see a 3, we're assuming 3 decimals. You have to look for it in order to know that it's there. That can be a little bit confusing. Good question. Especially other new people might get lost and things like that once you get going. Okay, so in the special assessment system, if I take option 11 and I list the special assessments, I'm going to list that ditch that we just sent through. So I'm going to take option 5 and list it by special assessment number. And then I can choose detail and totals. I'm going to do detail and totals. So I'll get all the details of it and the total assessment. And then I want to do only active, and I'm going to select a ditch or a assessment that I know is a ditch. 31205 is what we sent through from the ditch subsystem. So here's that ditch. If I go down to the bottom, we sent it through as $40,000. Now, this part right here is what pulls through from the ditch subsystem. The rate is 0.3% because that's what it was when I sent it through. I had 4 years, 2025, the initial amount. All of these columns are empty. That actually means that right now, if you printed your statements or ran your Prism, none of this is going to be on the statements because we haven't calculated our special assessments yet. Once you calculate your special assessments, these columns will generate. The where we option right here, option 3, is to calculate your special assessments. That actually takes, especially because I'm remote, that takes a minute. So I have another ditch. I'll just show you what it looks like once you've calculated. I sent it through yesterday, 31204. Oh, that's going to be wrong. I put 3102. Let's try again. Detail. 31204. So once you calculate your special assessments, then you're going to see what's currently due for 2025. Now you can remember that I put this through as a 4-year special. So even though the total amount is going to be 3017, we can see what's going on the statement in 2025. So if you wanted to change anything in an individual, you could go into option 1 and maintain your special assessments, very similar to the way we maintain our ditch assessments. Oops, I'm not going to do that. This is all explained in the sequence. If you were to realize, oops, I pushed that ditch through an error and I need to redo it, you can go into option 18 here and delete it and then go back and push it through. So 31205 is going to delete that ditch. I have to hit F5 to process. And then it will delete that so that I could like remake it if I wanted to.
Susie, on that. Go ahead.
I was just going to wrap up. What were you going to say, Michelle?
Oh, I just, on that report where you actually calculated it and it was a 4-year, when does it switch the remaining years to 3? I thought once you calculated it would go, it shows 3 years remaining versus 4 on the right there.
Right. So because I'm I'm looking at 2025.
Yep.
There's 4 years. Once we're at 2026, it would be 3 years.
That will never
No.
change. That's the number
this
of
will-
years to run that's in the file. That will always be a 4.
You're right. This one is
Yeah,
never going
that
to
one. I'm
change.
talking the one on the
This
right.
one, this one
Yeah,
over
I
here
would
is
have
the one
thought
that will
once we
change.
calculated, I thought it switches it to 3 so that you know that there's 3, or because we haven't done the new year, or whatever, that's not working right, or,
Right. We haven't done update to treasurers or.
So this will be a
listing
3.
I use to get, remaining when I'm doing the audit or whatever, where I have to book my remaining, then it had, usually the first year, yes, it's the 4, but once you have a current due, you've calculated that. I thought it switched it to 3 years left on the remaining balance.
Do we know when it switches to the 3?
I would have to look at that. I'm sorry. I can't answer that off the top of my head.
So it sounds
I
like
would-
right now it's saying 4, but by the time we get to like tax statement time, this is going to say there's 3 years left. It has to do with the fact that it starts in 2025 and it has 4 years to go. We'd have to look at how this pulls, but you're right, Michelle, it starts to go down,
Oh, Susie, what's your tax year? It's still 2024, right?
right? My tax year is still 2024.
So I'm guessing that has to do with it.
Once we do the sequence, then it'll
Yes.
print correctly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a brief overview of ditches and specials. Does anyone have any questions or anything else to add? I had my last slide. It's just a quick overview of specials. So again, well, I didn't dig into this, but in your special assessment subsystem, the first thing we'll have you do in the sequence is to clean up, remove old, inactive. We ask you to back up first, just in case something were to glitch while you're doing that. Then we suggest you list and proof your specials, and then you can maintain, calculate, list, and proof. And you just repeat these steps as necessary until your specials look the way you want them to. If you have a large number of new assessments this year, there is also a way to upload specials. Contact CPT if you have questions.
For the new people that are on CPT's boxes, if you're still running our backup every night, so you don't have to rerun the backup in the morning unless you're on your own system, correct?
Correct.
I don't know
Is
if any
it-
of your new counties are on your box or if they have their own, but I just wanted to make sure they knew that.
So if you're running this sort of first thing in the morning where you have a fresh backup, you don't necessarily need to run a clean backup first. My understanding is if something were to go wrong, it would be a little bit faster to get you going if you have if you ran a backup that's just tax, but we can go look at the large backup. Is that true?
Right. Yes.
And if you're doing this at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it would be a good idea to do a backup, depending upon the time of day.
Right. If you're doing it during the day, or especially like if you're staying late to do it or something, you're going to want a fresh backup.
Yeah, Susie, do you see there's a question in the chat?
Oh, no, I'm really bad at the chat. There is where is the special assessment practice? Do we copy? Oh, so there's a spot in the sequence that talks about if you have let me share my screen again. If you have a 1-year assessment that you use every year, and so you just want to update it, you would want to do that. Oh, actually, I want to do that here. You'd want to do that before cleaning up. If you clean up your old assessments and your 1-year assessment for 2024 is done, it's going to be removed during this cleanup. If you have a 1-year assessment for 2024 that you want to keep for 2025 or make a 1-year assessment in 2025, you would go in and you would do, isn't it option 8? You would go in and you would change the start year before cleaning up before starting that special assessment sequence?
Great question.
Yeah, great question. Otherwise, that's all I have.
I guess, does anybody else have any questions or comments about anything?
I didn't realize that I could do that from the special assessment. So if we have a ditch that's always say 20,000 every year, do we not have to do it through the ditch parameter file? Then we could just truly just do it in specials? I
As
won't
long
hurt
as
anything
nothing,
else.
as long as nothing has changed on that ditch, you could go in and change the start year. But
You
if
didn't have any
had like a
splits or
split or
anything.
something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I see a question
Yeah.
that says, can we get some type of message that comes up making sure that has been done before you clear?
Like,
You mean that you've changed any 1 years before you clean up your files, I assume?
Yes, I've had to re-enter before. I always forget that part.
We can add that to the beginning of that special assessment sequence. So it says, like, make sure you do this.
But that means I'd have to read the sequence.
Oh boy, now you're talking dirty.
I'm one of those people.
you want
at
a
least
message before the cleanup.
that, well, yeah, but I guess, if it's in the sequence, that would help. It's just, it's just one of those things that it's easy, because for us, our garbage assessments is what it does for us. So
Yeah.
we have several townships with garbage assessments, and they're just every year we carry them. I don't know if there's some kind of a warning, but if it's in the sequence at least, then it's on me to read it, so.
Well, that's true. That's where the backup would come in too.
Yeah,
Leanne,
but then I'd have to admit that I did it, though.
It's
Val knows.
always something.
Leanne, my mantra is usually if all else fails, read the direction.
Dang it.
That might
But
be
yeah,
a little late.
Yeah, it's gotten me into trouble just a couple times.
if it was in the sequence, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sounds good. We will be sending out the documentation that we went over today, couple of the sequences, the recording, in the a website page for you sometime in the next week here. So watch for that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or?
Thanks for having this today. I think this was really good for us to get together.
Yeah, I think so.
And you will have another one in January sometime to get us through tax statements.
Janelle,
Yes.
could you share your, all the sequences you do for your year-end reports?
Yes. I have
Perfect.
to, at the very last two, I don't have the software option numbers on them. So I'm going to finish that up here, hopefully yet today, and get it to you guys so you can send it out with your stuff.
Thank
Sounds
you.
great.
Okay,
All right.
thank you, everyone, and if we don't talk to you before then, have happy holidays and hope the weather holds here so we don't get too. But everybody, thank you again.
Thank you.